Hello. I think it is so interesting how our expectations about what we're going to read really impacts and modifies how we feel about a book and how we react to it. Because I just finished reading Creation Lake by Rachel Kushner, and I read this with my online book club, and we've had so many interesting discussions about it and a lot of different reader reactions to it, where some really gelled with it and loved the experience of it, and other readers really didn't. And I'm still trying to figure out how I feel about this book. So if you've read it, I'd love to know what you think. And I think it's really canny on the part of the publishers how they presented this novel, because on the inside cover it describes how this is the story of Sadie Smith, which isn't her real name because she's an undercover agent who infiltrates a French commune, and she's hired by a private corporation to monitor their activities, but also to gently encourage them to more extreme action, so they can be arrested and kind of put out of the way of this corporation's designs on this agricultural area of France. And on the one hand, yes, that is what the novel is about, and following her story as an undercover agent. But on the other side, it's not really what this novel is about at all. And so it doesn't describe this as a spy novel, but on the back cover, it has a quote from Hernan Diaz, who says she reinvents the spy novel in one cool erudite gesture. And so I think some readers have gone into this like expecting it to be a kind of spy caper with all of the kind of generic conventions that readers of that genre would expect. And I think if you go into it with that expectation, you will be sorely disappointed, because really the novel is about a lot of other things from that, and will be surprised going into it that there are long essayistic pieces about Neanderthals. and so for a lot of the beginning of the novel, there are emails from a figure named Bruno, who's a kind of guru to this commune that Sadie goes to infiltrate, that she is monitoring and reading, but then she starts really thinking about them, and he is going off about Neanderthals in the past and how there were an intermingling between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens at one point genetically, and what this means about who we are today as humans. And this is very different from kind of a moody spy story that is building up, to this big climax. And there is tension in the story, and it does work as a spy novel in some ways, but yeah, it doesn't adhere to the generic conventions that a lot of people would expect in a spy novel. And in fact, amongst all of these Neanderthal musings about it starts talking about Joan Crawford a lot, and there's a whole section called Joan Crawford's face, because he talks about how Neanderthals had a very wide and big face, and Sadie starts thinking about this in relation to Joan Crawford, who also had quite a large, very beautiful face. And I wonder if Rachel Kushner makes this reference because Joan Crawford in her later career made this film called Trog, which is a kind of horror, kind of mystery story where Joan Crawford plays this scientist that discovers a troglodyte and forms a connection with a troglodyte that's discovered in a cave. And it's a really bad movie, although I notice on the top it describes it as a cult camp classic, which it definitely is, because it's absolutely ridiculous. And one of my favorite scenes in it was when Joan Crawford is trying to teach this troglodyte about things, and she shows it the color blue, and she says, "Blue, this is blue." and Trog, who is just an actor in this completely ridiculous costume, is just sort of like, oh, it's so funny and ridiculous. And I don't know if Rachel Kushner was specifically thinking about this, because Bruno, the kind of guru of this community, he resides in his cave, and he just kind of sends these emails emails out to the community to inspire them and answer the questions they have about the direction of the community should go in. But really, he's just going off on all these tangents about deep history, and it is really interesting, or at least I found it so. And your enjoyment of this book will probably depend on how interesting you find these little pieces of information. So on the one hand, it kind of feels like Rachel Kushner is just kind of pieced together all of these things about like history and human evolution that she finds really interesting, and put it into a novel alongside this spy caper about an individual who's really like not even an anti-hero, as one member of my online book club commented, but really a villain, because she is really like monstrous in the way that she manipulates people and tries to motivate them to perform extreme actions when really they're much more like a kind of like mild protester, but she tries to push them into these more extreme actions, which is really horrible and based off from some real life cases which Kushner references in the book of the past of undercover agents who were representing a government body but went undercover in ecological groups and developed personal relationships with people of the group under the guise of pretending to be somebody else, and in some cases in history have like had children with people and kept up this guise of being under an assumed identity for many years, and through having these personal relationships, and this has like come out into the open and felt like such an egregious thing to occur, and so she takes an example of an individual like this, wondering what would that person be like, and what would drive a person to do these things. And so Sadie is this very like in many ways like a very like cold individual who just who doesn't believe that anyone has any real political beliefs, that is just all a front, and she is just performing a job, and so feels self-justified in doing this. But I also think she has this sense that she really enjoys feeling like she has the upper hand in every social situation that she is in, that she is really orchestrating things to the way that she wants them to be. But over the course of the narrative, I think it shows how there are certain cracks, and she's not really as good a spy as she thinks she is. And but she starts ruminating on all these things about human nature and has this unique point of view, which is also quite like funny and engaging to read about. She makes a lot of catty comments about the French countryside and French people, but also like people in general, which in some ways is like very like stereotypical and horrible, but is also like quite funny to read about. Like she makes a comment at one point that the more rural and older the Frenchman you meet, the higher the belt of his trousers will be, which is just like a very funny comment. And she also makes a comment about how terrines, which are often consumed in France, she just likens to cat food, and so she makes a lot of these comments, but she also makes observations about human nature in general. And at one point she's meditating this and observes how, or asks, what is it people encounter in their stark and solitary 4 a.m. self? What is inside them? Not politics. There are no politics inside of people. The truth of a person, under all the layers and guises, the significations of group and type, the quiet truth underneath the noise of opinions and beliefs, is a substance that is pure and stubborn and consistent. It is hard, white salt. The salt is the core, the 4 a.m. reality of being. And so it's raising all these bigger questions about who we really are as people. What are our motivations, and what do our beliefs like really say about us? How much do we actually adhere to these beliefs, and how much are we just falling under the opinions of very charismatic individuals? And I think it's interesting following as Sadie becomes more and more interested in this figure of Bruno, who's just dwelling in a cave, sending out these missives about his beliefs and his meditations on life. And she feels an increasing attachment to him, but she has no real connection with him because Bruno doesn't even know that she's reading his emails and is starting to develop this relationship with him. But so it's kind of all inside her head, but she's also observing all of the activities of this commune. And as she it gets introduced to the commune, she starts to understand that really this is a small group of individuals, some of whom are who have these grand theories about how society and communities should be organized, and then there are other members of the community that are just there and living day to day and getting on with things. And then there are these corporations and larger government bodies who hire her to go undercover in these smaller groups that whose opinions are running counter and are muddling their plans for larger society of corporations' plans of that they want to take over the land and control the water in ways which will increase their profits, and so sends this undercover agent in to do that. And so there are larger things at play, and where does the individual lie in all of this? Where do we fall into it? And Sadie is someone who doesn't feel like she falls on either side of the political divide. She feels like she's actively outside of it, but at the same time, she does come from a particular place which we don't know anything about, but we get little hints about her personality and her past, which she thinks she has just been able to cover up, and she's able to present this persona to a commune in order to infiltrate it in this way and monitor them, and so it's raising these larger issues and about life, and Nancy, a member of my book group, made a really interesting comment that Bruno is kind of like online influencers, and that you could say that this novel is commenting on our online life and how we are falling into different groups and categories, often under the influence of a very charismatic individual whose beliefs we adopt as our own. But are they our own beliefs, or are we just falling under this influence? And so yeah, I think this novel is saying a lot, but also it's difficult to decipher what the real meaning of it is. And I know some members of my group have really struggled to figure out well, what is this book actually saying and what is it concluding? But then at the same time, you have to wonder well, should we finish reading a novel and think oh, I understood everything about it, it's all neatly tied up, and there we have the answer? Or is it better to have a book that leaves you ruminating on a number of things? And even though you could say that Kushner is just mashing these two things together of her interest in Neanderthals and her interest in historical cases of spies that have infiltrated groups like this, that she does use a lot of imagery and has themes which are woven throughout the book, which develop more resonance and meaning as the story goes on and progresses. And I found that really poignant, how that all comes together. So Sadie really enjoys the image of a line of poplar trees down a road, and finds that really mesmerizing. And I think it's one of the ways of that Sadie and Bruno both enjoy looking into the sense of deep time. And so you could see the poplar trees as past generations going all the way back to early humans, and as a way of looking into the deep past in this way. And also Bruno dwelling in this cave like this is peering into and seeing markings from generations past, going way back deep in time. And there's examples of caves in France where you could see like early humans markings on these caves. But also Sadie at the end, she is looking up at the sky and studying like distant stars and thinking about space and time in and history in this very deep way. But then at the same time, she notices how a lot of the lights we see in the night sky, or not a lot, but some of them will be satellites that are just passing through the sky, and we might mistakenly think of them as stars. And so there's a kind of like illusion. And so are these like meditations we have about the deep past or the future of the world, are they really deep, or are they kind of like superficial? Are they like kind of artifices and illusions that we have about time and reality? And so yeah, this novel raises a lot of really interesting questions to ponder, but at the same time, I think readers' enjoyment of it or dissatisfaction with the book will depend on what they go into it expecting and thinking the novel will be about. And I was really surprised by what I found in this book, and found it really engaging, following the story and how it does work up to this climax in the story of the plot of the spy plot of the novel, to this agricultural fair where a protest is occurring and a conflict occurs. And so we see the climax of that, and it is really interesting how it plays out, and the results of that. You could have many different interpretations of it, and about Sadie's character, and about these larger themes that Kushner develops over the course of the book. And so yeah, this is a really interesting experience, and I'm really keen to know what other readers have made about it and want to continue discussing it more. And I think I've found discussions about this book as interesting as the experience of reading it itself, which is such a wonderful thing about novels, and why I think reading is so exciting. So thank you for watching me discuss this book, and I'll be interested if you want to read this book now, or if you have read it. Yeah, please let me know what you think in the comments. But I hope you're doing well, and have a good day, and I'll speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.